welcome to Soap and Glory, which is the WGGB's Zoom event celebrating soap and soap writers and the unsung heroes of British drama. I'm very lucky to be joined this afternoon by three incredibly experienced writers and soap writers in their own right. And if they'd like to introduce themselves, I'll start with Nessa Murphy.
Hi, I'm Lisa. I'm here in my capacity for Coronation Street. I've been on the show for 3 years now, written I think around 40 episodes in that time. But I've also worked on other shows, some which are out, some which aren't. So Grantchester, Gentleman in Moscow, The Winter King, and a 4-part drama co-written with a Coronation Street writer actually for Channel 5.
Philip?
Hello, I'm Phil Ralph, and I'm here in my capacity as a Doctors writer. I've been on Doctors for about 19 years. I've written 70 plus episodes. I've also written for Casualty in Holby City alongside a lot of work in documentary drama.
And last but by no means least, Tim Stimpson.
Hi, I'm Tim. I'm here to talk about The Archers, which I'm very proud to say is the world's longest running soap opera, which was 72 years and just celebrated our 20,000th episode and still going strong. So that's me.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for joining us today. The reason we're all here today is down to you, Philip. Can you tell us why you felt we needed this event?
Well, so thank you, Lisa. I found myself writing to the Guild not so long ago with a concern that's been bubbling up in me for a while now about a nagging idea that CDS writers, and because I write for Doctors writers in particular, but CDS writers across the board are actually the great unsung heroes of writing in this country. One of the things as a WGGB member is every week I get the Writers Bulletin, and as part of that it'll say writers upcoming work, and week on week 90 to 95% of the writers who have work coming up in that coming week are writers for soaps and continuing drama. And yet one of the things that I've become increasingly aware of for my own career is a sense that the work that we do is less valued or not valued at all across the wider industry. And what I really want to do is be positive and actually say we are this great unused resource of incredibly passionate, skilled, gifted, experienced writers who are creative on an incredible level week in, week out. And I just really want to see if it's possible to shift the narrative, because that's what we do as writers, is shift the narrative around those issues and actually ask the question, could we get more mobility in the industry and actually writers of CDS become valued resources rather than just, oh, well, they write for CDS. So it's about a passionate desire on my part to see the work that we do recognized and valued.
So I was doing an event on Saturday with Chris Eccleston, and in his book he's very passionate about lots of working class expression, working class art form, but he's incredibly snobby about soap and he doesn't think it holds any value, and I asked him to make an apology about that. Do you think there's still a lot of snobbery because of who watches soaps and a consideration about who it represents as well?
Well, yeah, I certainly do, and I think demographically speaking, soap has always been it's always been the garden wall, it's always been the garden fence, the community, and yeah, the demographic that has engaged with soap, historically has been older, been more working class. I think something about the nature of the storytelling is viewed as not quite so highfalutin as the high-end dramas, and therefore it's sort of slightly beneath contempt. And there is a snobbery around it. I definitely think so. Whereas actually, if anybody watches the soaps now, that isn't borne out by the experience of what you see on the screen at all. The storytelling is incredibly sophisticated. The performances and the direction are incredibly skillful and sophisticated. So I think it's a misnomer to say that that's the case in soap now.
Yeah, I kind of felt the same thing as well. And I think, The Archers in particular, I mean, Doctors has other issues. The Archers inhabits this weird place where, because we're not a TV soap, but we're also this funny little program that's made in Birmingham and isn't quite part of the radio drama world either. I mean, we barely ever get, you know, we're not part of the TV Soap Awards. We barely ever get nominated for the BBC Audio Drama Awards. We just carry rolling on. But there is, this, and it's something to do with ubiquity of it. The way you just roll on, it's like, oh, we don't need to concern ourselves with that. That'll just always be there. They just do that thing over there. So yeah, you do feel dismissed sometimes.
Do you think part of the snobbery, and I do think it's snobbery, is, and it's something that I think is becoming more and more apparent, is how the audience member is valued. So the person in my family who watches the soaps, and if you ever need to know anything about that you've forgotten about your storylines, then you could just ring my mum up, because she tells me it from the thread to the needle every Sunday. And do you think that part of the devaluing is ageism, misogyny, because it's seen as a female viewing pleasure? Do you think that's operable in that? Tim, what do you think?
I don't know about the female thing. Maybe I'm the wrong gender to answer that. I don't know. That's a really tricky one. I think there's kind of, I'll go back to kind of what I was saying about my mum and why I took the mick out of her. There's a condescension about being so wrapped up in stories of people's ordinary lives and being interested. I mean, it's one of the things I love about the Archers is I love the minutiae.
Yeah,
I love that it's not, you know, huge dramatic things happening with people leading incredibly exciting lives, or, you know, but I love getting to that human minutiae of how we all just live our daily lives. But I think there's a condescension about, oh, that's not real drama. That's not, and why are you so invested in it? Why do you care about it? So I think there's that going on. I don't know what you guys think about that.
I think there's a direct, like, not with, I don't mean with you, Lisa, but then there's a direct contradiction, because when you look at the viewing figures, you know, I think, I don't want to, please don't quote me on this. I think Corrie, because that's who I work, I think they're at 4 million. You know, that is, I know, like, that's extraordinary. 4 million people watching that. So, you know, like, I think that, you know, if ever that comes, you know, if that was ever to come up, I go, well, who are the 4 million people watching the show then? Do you know what I mean? Like, I just think the numbers speak for themselves, and I say that as somebody who's not a numbers person.
I think also the commercial value, certainly of Emmerdale and Coronation Street, is evident. It's the lead-in for the other shows, the prime time stuff.
Exactly.
And quite honestly, they flog a lot of advertising around, and the soaps, I think, often are making the money that's making other television programs on the channel.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think it might be something to do with, you know, a perceived shifting demographic, you know, the kind of the younger audiences don't watch them. I mean, there's obviously, it will have sent a shiver through the industry when Hollyoaks went entirely online, but they've followed their audience. They've gone where their audience are to do that. But I also think, you know, in a more socially atomized age, the soaps are what they've always been, which is the garden fence. You know, they've and actually, one of the things I love about them, is picking up on something Tim said, is you know, we tell stories about people that, with the odd occasional murder and car crash, although not on doctors, we can't afford them, but you know, we had one recently, didn't we? You know, we tell stories of normal people trying to live normal lives, trying to resolve their issues, you know, without conflict, with, you know, trying to be decent people. And again, I go back to the thing for me about that they're the modern play for today. That it's how we talk about values, it's how we talk about who we are as people. And I think that, in a way, you know, it's not the high end, you know, high action, glossy production values, but actually it's about humanity at a deeper level, and I really love them for that. I always have.
Yeah. No, there's two instances that just stick in the personal things that happened to me, and this isn't to blow smoke up my own backside, but I think the second episode of The Archers that I ever wrote, one of the characters, Adam, was the first gay character in the Archers, and it's a particularly big deal, rural community. I had people I knew, friends in the rural community going, "Oh, I love that storyline." I mean, it's as if there are gay people in the countryside. I mean, there still was that attitude 20 years ago. And so my second episode was him he'd just come out, and there was a big row between his mum and her mum. And a couple of weeks later, I got passed on this letter from a listener who said, "I'm gay. I struggled so much with it. If only that I'd heard that episode when I was a teenager, it would have made my life so much easier." And then more recently, I wrote another episode that was a therapy session about one of our characters, Elizabeth, who had depression. And speaking to another listener, and she said, "I've had awful depression and my mum could never understand it. She was just very much pull your socks up, that kind of thing." So then she heard that episode for the first time we've started actually talking. And she started to understand. And you get those stories.
Yeah.
And you go, that's why I do this job, because you're connecting in that way and impacting on people's lives. When you get those stories, that a lot of the time, you might be writing the big car crash, or you might with all the murder, or you might even be writing the flower produce sale in the panto. It feels a bit inconsequential. But when you do get to write those stories that are really speaking to people, it's I couldn't. What other job will give you this? This is amazing.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And I say that more as a fan than as a writer. Like I grew up watching all of the soaps, and like that. And maybe it sounds grand, but for me it's true. They save lives and they change lives, because they're in your, everyone's probably heard this, but they're in your living room 6 nights a week, or or in your ears, however many days. And there's nothing more intimate than that. And when and as you say, like a character who suddenly you see a part of yourself in, or a version or a story, I just think they're absolutely extraordinary. And so it was my childhood dream to be able to do this. So dreams do come true.
It never ceases to amaze me the things that soap manages to cover that on a primetime drama, editorial policy or compliance, etc., would feel jumpy about, and that real world impact. So when Emmerdale did testicular cancer with Zach Dingle, found a lump, went and got it checked out, detection rates went up in the UK.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's an extraordinary impact. And Tim, of course, you were involved in the abuse and coercive relationship storyline on the Archers, which had an enormous impact.
It had a crazy effect, and the thing that really struck me, because of the particular demographic of the Archers and the Radio 4 audience that we get. So I was at this women's aid conference where I felt like a complete sham. They wanted to speak about the show, and I'm there in front of a couple of hundred people who are actually working with real people in the real world, and here I am talking about my made-up characters, and they're all But afterwards, I got speaking to a barrister who'd had to defend a very similar case. So, if you didn't know the story, this is so Helen Archer has been coercively controlled by her husband for a couple of years. We've run the story over 2 years, until eventually she tries to get away from him, and she ends up stabbing him and almost killing him, and then she gets put up for attempted murder. And they had a very similar case in the real world. And the guy kind of got off because he was able to manipulate the jury, because these guys are very good, that's what they do. And her colleague, who'd been his barrister to defend him, came up to her and said, "We got that case wrong, didn't we?" Because he listened to the show, and they'd realized that the way the courts deal with coercive control and those kind of very manipulative abusers, they got it completely wrong. And you kind of go, wow, I'm now kind of, judges and barristers are listening to this, and really sadly, one more anecdote and I'll shut up. There was a meeting in the Houses of Parliament about abuse and coercive control, and the one by Refuge and I think Women's Aid again, and they normally would get 3 MPs, maybe they did it annually. Then the Archers went with them for this one meeting, and the room was just full of MPs, because suddenly the story, and sadly it shouldn't be that way. Those MPs should be there for the issue. But in the real world, that's what got them in the room.
Yeah.
Was there being this big story that they listened to on the radio as well?
Yeah, it's very similar. It's way before I was writing, but I remember watching it as a teenager when Sarah Platt had a teenage pregnancy, and it was, I think the country was probably in the grips of, like, you know, very high teenage pregnancy rates, and it was discussed in Parliament. The show was, so I'm not by any means taking any credit for that whatsoever, but like, I think there is a real, you know, impact. A tangible impact that the shows have.
Sorry, Lisa. I just to pick up on that, not to blow smoke up my bottom, but the episode that I was talking about earlier was also about abusive relationships and coercive control, and the great thing about that was writing, because Doctors affords us the opportunity to pitch and write standalone episodes. You know, we have that opportunity. So that was very much pitched as a standalone episode, and then they said, would you like, you know, have you got any more? And I said, I think there's probably a two-parter, and I completed the arc of the character through the court system. And again, very much like you're describing, Tim, you know, actually was able to do the research as if I were writing a 90-minute play, basically, and you know, and do that proper research and go, this is what it's like for women who have been through this situation to go through the court system, you know, who have attacked their partner because it's all too much, and then they go through the court system based on a real life case. But I also just wanted to pick up on something that Kat said in the chat, which was a question mark about daytime, which I think it is a fair point to say that daytime is not valued across the industry, and so, you know, that I wonder if there is that gap between, you know, the primetime soaps and the daytime soap. And I know that The Archers in that respect obviously goes out during the day, but it's a very much, you know, it's a national treasure, quite rightly, after 70 years. And I suppose what I would really like to offer is to try and put a positive spin on this, if it's possible, you know, because I think you know, we all want to moan, of course, but you know, that actually I think we're the great untapped resource in terms of the writing community for television in the country. For me, I think the opportunities that are available across this community of writers who write for CDS and who want to write for CDS. So I was fortunate to listen to, I don't know if any of you have heard it yet or have come across it, but Scribe Lounge are running their script labs at the moment, and they're a fantastic resource, incredible. And they did a panel the other day with 3 CDS writers, Chris Woodley, who I think might be on the call here today, Philip Lawrence and Jodie Ashdown. And it's a fantastic thing, and you can listen back to it. But one of the things that they said, they were talking about how to get in. And at one point, one of them said, I can't remember which show they were talking about, they said it took 4 years from contacting a script editor to getting a commission. And so what I'm not arguing for, because I love writing for the Doctors and I love writing for soaps, I guess what I'm arguing for is more mobility through the industry. And actually to go, if there's more mobility and the skills that we bring and we have learned in the gym of CDS can be applied elsewhere, then there's more opportunities for other people to come in and get those commissions. It was 4 years there. There's Chris. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, I really think there's a huge untapped resource at a time when the industry, it feels to me, is at a pivotal point in terms of its, because of the WGA strikes, I think, and the slowdown, etc. You know, that there's an opportunity for shift and change, and actually there's this huge untapped resource of really creative people with an awful lot of skills who could and should be doing other things so that new people can come in. So that's basically my case.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. And also to address a question that's in the chat from Tony about gatekeeping in soaps. I think at the other end, if our industry really wants to talk about representation, bringing new voices in, mixing things up, then looking at who's sat around the table on soaps. And I will admit, for the 3 years I was at Emmerdale, we were an overwhelmingly white team, and there was only one person there with a disability. And obviously, soaps need to be representative of Britain as a whole. It's improved now; it's got a lot better. But I do feel that when it's one of the massive barriers to a writing career is the financial barrier, the lack of stability, a job where one of the few jobs in television and in radio where there is a degree of stability should be much more accessible to newer writers, newer voices. And when I say new writers, I don't mean 18-year-olds. I mean people coming on stream later in their careers and bringing interesting lived experience to it.
I was just gonna back you up with that, Lisa. That's kind of my soapbox, is always that financial stability. Is I was really fortunate. The way I got into the Archers at the time, the editor Vanessa Whitburn, she commissioned everyone for 12 months, so you knew what your commissions are going to be for at least a year. And I remember always saying, I don't understand why writers shouldn't be able to know how they're going to pay their rent next month. And I was a naive. I was 20. I think I was 23, 24. I was so naive that when I was trying to rent my first flat and they needed a reference, I wouldn't do this now. I phoned Vanessa up on a Saturday. I said, can you tell them I'm going to have a job? And she did it, because she knew that, you're starting out, you need someone who's going to back you up in those practical ways, not just, and I think if you believe in someone creatively and you want to back them, don't then just leave them dangling on this financial, thread, not knowing how they're going to pay, how can anyone who hasn't got a bit of resource behind them commit to pursuing that life? Otherwise, it's crazy. You can have all the schemes you want, but unless you tackle that systematic economic problem, you're not going to get the diversity you're after.
It's frustrating to see the same old scheme run over and over again, when certainly the WGGB have expressed our concerns over it, and it shouldn't be a competition. It should be the programmes going out and finding interesting writers and bringing them on. I think, Adam, and thank you for your question, a concern about stagnation on those teams, but I think it's at both ends of the problem, which is because soap writers aren't valued and given that chance. There was a point at which soap writers were approached for their ideas, and development in-house was done with soap writers, and you could move on to the next level. But it also feels like that middle tier of moving up to other people's shows, doing an episode of other things is kind of stripped away, and the stepping stones missing.
Yeah. I mean, those middle shows pretty much don't exist anymore, or if they do, they have a similar stagnation issue, because everything has gone high end. And what's really interesting about that, as I said to you in the incredibly long email I sent to you, Lisa, sorry, is that there are the big beasts who of course, when they have an idea, it gets commissioned because they're the big beasts. And then alongside them, there seems to be this really interesting thing I think the executives have got now, which is, let's find the new genius savant who can just deliver without any experience. And so for me, I think it's about saying, can we put the ladder back in? Which in lots of ways is what the WGA were fighting to retain in the States, was some sense of career progression and ladder, and a sense of you can build a career. And I think in doing that, if I could start that conversation, then I think more people could come in, because there will be more space in CDS shows, and actually, things will move a bit more. But I know I'm pushing a boulder up a hill here, but I'm passionate about it.
I think changing perceptions amongst those who as Tony said, the gatekeepers, both the gatekeepers on the soaps and further on, that understanding that, good grief, the skill set you develop on a soap is extraordinary. And I still say that Emmerdale was my apprenticeship. It taught me a respect for deadlines, it taught me about production, it taught me how to work with other people, because it's the bear pit of the monthly story conference, which I still miss. I haven't written for Emmerdale for 20 years, and I still feel jealous when I hear they're going to story conference. Nessa, is that an aspect of it you enjoy?
Oh my gosh, well, I'm here now. I absolutely, that's the thing. Like, as I love our team. I just sound like a sycophant, but like, it's a joyful, amazing job, and there is part of you that's like, well, why? They're gonna have to drag me out of it because we've just done 3 days, 2.5 days, and like you're talking, you know, you're talking about story, you're talking about the world, we are a real community, like the Corrie writers, like, and a real you know, doesn't mean there aren't debates and just, you know, discussions, and it's very scary to, you know, lay out your guts and your soul and put your, you know, and offer up a story, but it is I think that's you know, I have spent most of this in a state of astonishment, I suppose, but like I am astonished because people don't, the joy of it makes me emotional, because like I just love coming to conference. I've met people that will be the friends for life, you know, and so there is it's an amazing job, as Tim was saying, and like why, you know, why would you want to you know, like to be able to tell the stories. And I think for my sensibility, which is someone, you know, obviously it's soap, and we, you know, there's a variety of story types, and that's a joy as well, but I do like the stories that tap into the why now, the state of the nation, and that look at the world under a microscope. So it's just you know, for me, I'm very selfishly, like, it's an ideal vehicle for me as a human as well as an artist. So I mean, conference is just, yeah, conference is brilliant.
I was just going to echo that. It's I love writing as a team. It's a real pleasure, and I wonder if that's kind of, there is a sense that doesn't have the prestige of other shows. I think that's part of it as well, is there isn't the individual author.
Yeah.
You know, as the writer, you're kind of anonymous.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of, I love it.
Yeah.
You know, you know, it was one of the reasons why I'm going to say I do stay, is because I get to spend some time writing as a group.
Yes.
With great joy, and then I can go away and write my own stuff.
Yeah.
Kind of in my own voice, and then when that gets a bit too lonely, you know, and hard work, it's back with the team again, and you get rejuvenated by it.
Exactly. So, yeah, I completely agree. Like, it is, you feel, I think because you're freelancers, you know, and as writers you are, unless you're in a rehearsal room or, you know, wherever, I mean, obviously you work with script editors, whatever project you're working on, but there is a lot of loneliness. So to feel like, you know, like it's so probably, I sound really silly, but even like the idea of wearing a badge, you know, and like going into an office, like going to work, is really a bit like emotionally appealing.
But so again, I guess to offer a contrast there, doctors, we don't have those meetings
Right.
because they can't afford to pay
Right.
us and to put us up. We don't have those meetings.
Mm.
You know, every once in a while, one of us will be invited to go to a story meeting, which is between the producers and the script editors. But other than that, we're kind of on our own, you know, and I really want to kind of, you know, sing a hymn of praise to the script editors, because I think often they're seen as the gatekeepers, and they're often seen as being, oh, well, I can't get in because of them. You know, the workload that they have on these shows is beyond belief. Yeah, and the fact that within that workload, particularly on doctors, there's, you know, they are tasked with bringing new writers on as well. You know, it is astonishing that they are as good-natured as they are, and they do such a brilliant job. And also kind of going to set, which is a rarity. I was on set a couple of weeks ago, and, you know, that was on my dime, because they can't afford to pay us and they can't afford to put us up. But being there, the importance of being there, and just seeing the pace they work at, and the goodwill that these shows survive on. So again, whilst I don't want to single doctors out, I do kind of feel like it's the one that gets the least kudos in this whole realm. And of course I would, because I write on it, but I'd like that to shift, really, because I think the writers on that show do an astonishing job. The crew and the team on that show do an astonishing job with, you know, not very much.
Whilst we are singing the praises of Dr. Zanan, I absolutely agree that it's, and I've been a judge on the RTS Awards in the Midlands in the past, and always feel a bit ashamed that I come to incredible episodes of drama and watch them. I think, why isn't the BBC singing the praises and putting trailers for this incredible drama out there? I will also, by way of inclusion, remind everybody that we've got 2 soaps in our nation, so Pobble and River City as well.
Indeed. Yeah.
And there is some discussion that there will be a new CDS. So when Holby City came to an end, which was, I think, incredibly upsetting for a lot of writers and put a lot of people out of work, there was a promise from the BBC that it will be replaced by 2 new hour-long CDSs. Now, we now know that Waterloo Road in its return is one of them, and that's fantastic. And I was lucky enough to write on the new iteration, having written on the old iteration of it. What would our panel like to see from the other as yet undisclosed CDS? It's a hard one. I'm asking you to pitch.
Yeah.
I'd like another story of the day show.
Mm.
I think you know, the change in Casualty, particularly because obviously once Holby went, Casualty and Doctors were the last 2 story of the day shows standing, and I think I think having that level of agency as a writer on a CDS show to create your own self-contained stories within the ep is a phenomenal thing to get to do. And I think it's really important that retains, because yeah, it's just such an important skill for a writer.
Tim and Nessa, anything you'd like to say?
I bring back the bill.
Yeah, absolutely.
or a
Cop show.
Yeah, cop show.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
think it feels like there's space for that.
It's not like there's any drama in the police force at the moment that couldn't be mined, is there? I mean, really.
Exactly. When you talk
Breaking the
about
barrel for story. I think this is not an original thought, which is terrible, but I agree with you, for that the story, play for today, the story of the show, as I did many moons ago, write Holby City, and there is a real difference. There's a real difference between writing something serialized and writing something. It's not a soap, but I did an episode of Grantchester recently, and there were huge elements of it there, but also it was about me bringing the guest story as well. So, and it's a different discipline, maybe not discipline, but it requires a different part of the brain, and therefore I imagine the audience are going to get a different experience when they watch it. So I think I hadn't, to my shame, recognized that depletion in the soap ecology. So I think you're right, and I think it's that they strike that authored balance, don't they, as well? Although I would say that I feel like Corrie certainly is very, that I maybe it's because I know the writers, but I can tell which writer has written that episode. Like there's a real distinction.
Yeah, I'm in Hebden Bridge teaching an avant course to new writers and trying to balance out absolute despondency with a bit of encouragement, because sometimes I think writers can go down that alley, and the collective noun for writers is a whinge of writers, no doubt about it. But yeah, I think telling them that soap is a definitely interesting place to look for them to head to, that there's joy to be had there in hanging out with other writers and doing that, I think is really important. So there's a question from Will Hall. Do you think one of the big streaming platforms could develop a soap? And Alex has reminded him that Neighbours has moved onto Amazon Prime. I think it's a little bit too soon to know whether that's been a success or not, but do you see a time when maybe Netflix decides it needs the soap? It feels like a no-brainer for a streamer. If it's based on subscriptions, if you hook people into a soap, they're going to carry on paying their subscriptions even when Stranger Things finishes. So
right, yeah, no, that does make sense. I guess the argument will always be around soaps that they are local to a nation or a place, and so I suppose it's finding a soap. I mean, but obviously Neighbours has managed to transcend that. But I guess it's finding a soap precinct that people feel strongly enough would work across. But yeah, I think it's a great idea.
But I think,
Felipe, you advocated for the return of El Dorado.
Listen. When I was an actor, I was in Castles. Anybody remember Castles? No, yeah, I was an actor in Castles, and that was after El Dorado plummeted. That was the first attempt to do something after that, and that died on its bottom as well. So, but Jesse Birdsall needs the work. Come on.
Absolutely.
with all those big shows on the streamers as well, I think they'd be well served by getting some CDS writers on them, because I often have that frustration of having to build to something to the end of a series, and then are we going to get commissioned again? Oh yes, we have. Right, we better untangle a whole load of that. And you just think, oh, if only someone had the confidence in the show,
yeah,
to be able to sit back and properly storyline this out. In the way you will, because a lot of them are effectively soaps, especially the way we watch them, when we binge them.
Yeah, exactly.
If you watch 3 seasons all in a row, like I do sometimes,
Also,
3 or
I
4
think,
seasons,
sorry, I didn't
No,
mean
no, it has the same story effect, but you can feel that moments where the season's lagging because it's just waiting to do the big climax at the end of it,
Yeah, whereas when a soap where you've got multiple stories, you look over here whilst you let that one have a what was the thing I was going to say? Oh, it's gone up my brain, which is not helpful.
But we inherently know, because it's what we do all the time. We know about hooks.
Yes, exactly.
Hooks are what we do, right? I mean, it's just all the time, not just at the end of an ep or an advert break, but every scene we know how to hook a scene.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also there's something, and this is I think a plus as a writer, is that you can and again I speak for Corrie, but if you can have an idea, and obviously it's discussed and chewed over but ultimately there was one story that I pitched with a few colleagues of mine that was an idea in the August, and it was on screen by the March. Where else are you ever going to get that? And I do believe the only way you learn as a writer, whether you're working in theatre or whatever, is to see your work perform, because they're not literary documents that you're not writing a book. Obviously, you're writing something that's going to be alive and needs to feel. So and you need to feel something, and so I feel like that is such an amazing, in terms of the hours that you've clocked up of drama, and that there's loads of people that I work in lots of other things, and they're maybe they're in development roles, but actually when it comes, and they've developed loads of stuff, but have they actually seen it to the end, seen it made? Sometimes not always. So I think that is a huge appeal.
Yeah,
it was very hard for my family once I left Emmerdale. The question I get asked by the aunties and uncles and cousins when I see them is, when do you have something on next? And it used to be, I've got an episode on next week, and now it's the new year. Good question. I have absolutely no idea. So that instance is great. Is there an argument for a genre soap? And let me explain my thinking about this. I think that the Marvel comics, both in their iteration in the cinematic universe and in the hard copy comics, I think it's a soap. I think it is multiple storylines.
I wish we had their budget, Lisa.
Well, very much so. But I just wonder if there's an argument for a genuine space opera, somewhere set on the new Mars colony or something like that would reinvigorate soap.
Yeah, I mean, particularly since now you can shoot in volumes and you can do all the back projection stuff. You don't need the sci-fi the budgets that. I think so, definitely. I think definitely space soap.
My daughter, when we moved in, she didn't like it, unfortunately, but she had a Marvel wall that was left from the little boy that lived there, and we had painted over it. But I was like, oh my gosh, yes, that is, it's a world, as you say, it's a universe, and they all crisscross and they're all interlocking. So I completely agree.
Well, as some of you will know who've joined these Zooms before, usually when I'm at home, there's a life-size Iron Man wearing a Leeds United scarf behind. So I would totally watch a space soap. We're coming to the end of this, and thank you to everybody who's joined in on the chat. Great advocacy for bringing back the old soaps. People would like to see Family Affairs and The Bill. I'd love London's Burning to come back into a really
was amazing. Oh my god,
that was a great show. So I think, you know, even soaps that have passed on to the choir invisible are still enjoyed a great deal by people and held a great affection. And I'm going to ask all three of you to think of something that you would improve about for the current soap writers lot. What would make your life better, your career more secure? What should the guild be advocating for you guys? And I'll start with you, Philip.
Oh, you would, wouldn't you?
I would.
I think for me, it really is making the argument that soap writers should not be undervalued in the industry. I think it begins and ends there for me, about actually, you know, parity with other writers, parity with writers on other shows, parity with writers on The Wire. I don't care. We write brilliant drama day in, day out, and I think we should be celebrated for it. And when our agent says, "Oh, I've got this writer, you know, would you be interested?" and they look, and if they see CDS shows, they should go, "Great, this person writes for CDS. They know what they're doing." For me, that's it.
Tim?
I think I'd say, if you don't like the ideas of 0-hour contracts in other industries, don't treat writers in the same way. You know, like we were saying, give some security. If you believe in someone, back them with a series of commissions so that they know that they can survive for a year. You know, I said this before, but for me, that would make a huge difference. You know, it's very, you know, I can understand why it works like that, because it makes it very, very easy for productions. But actually sticking with committing to someone, if you believe in them as a writer,
yes,
would make a massive difference.
Nessa?
I'm probably gonna have like a sycophantic answer, but I genuinely, especially listening today to what you were saying, Philip, like I think I do think Corrie gets it right. Like, I think the way they treat the writers is so respectful, and I would say be more Corrie, but also to specifically give a shout out to the people who employed me and work with Ian and Verity McLeod, who I think, you know, lead the ship in such an extraordinary way, and that the you know, the writers are held in such you know, really treasured, I would say, on this show. And I think the systems that are in place on this show are exceptional. So maybe, I don't know, I feel like Ian and Verity are going to get loads of emails now saying like that they how do you do it? But I think the way they honestly, like, it is the best job I've ever, you know, that I've ever had. Like, yeah.
That's wonderful to hear, because I must admit, we're not often inundated at the Guild with people saying how happy they are.
Yes, sorry.
On the show. It's
Yeah.
only so how lovely to finish on a positive note. Thank you, Philip, Tim and Nessa. I'm really glad I was able to make it, because this has been a great session. Thank you to everybody who's joined us this afternoon, and have a really great evening.